Hello and welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. And today on the podcast we have Spencer Shaw from Podkick. Spencer, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. It's always a pleasure getting to chat with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on again. And today we're going to talk, I believe the loose topic we threw out there was kind of the secret sauce of Cyberdogz, some of the back end dealings and kind of how we've grown here in the last year.
Exactly. I think I used the word how the sausage is made, but I think secret sauce sounds better.
There you go. So where would you like to begin? What's the, I will say that it's hard when, I think you can agree with this, but when you're in the thick of it every day, you don't see what you're doing as all that unique sometimes until you step back from it and kind of recognize where the industry is or maybe where your competitors are. For me, it's, we're heads down and we're just cranking all the time. So a lot of times when I'm asked questions like this, it's kind of a deer in the headlights of going, yeah, I'm not sure. Let me think about that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one where it all starts at the foundation of working with people that you trust, people that you like, and having a strong filter for quality. And then we live in a world of serious distraction right now. And distraction, I'm not just talking like the distraction of like our phone distraction. I'm talking like the explosion of AI and people grabbing a prompt from online that they got from a $7 ebook. And now they've become like the design master in the world. And you're like, that's good. But there's like strategy and thought and all of these other pieces, and getting to work with individuals that have maybe some of the latest and greatest tools, but they have the decades of understanding why, not just the deliverable, is key. So I'm sure we'll go down that too.
Yeah, I would even add it's a good distraction, but the distraction of evolution as it just pertains to business, but specifically with AI, I think we have to deal with that just, in our own world. But at the same time, you have to kind of defend and navigate the public perception as well. Because I have clients asking me about it. I have clients that are like, I don't want to touch that stuff. And I have clients that want to fully embrace it. So as I'm learning and as I'm trying to get my business up to speed and how it'll become applicable in my own business, I'm also having to kind of navigate those conversations with the client and honestly, to keep their expectations realistic for right now until we kind of see where all this goes.
Yeah, absolutely. You mean it can't do everything for us? Like, all right, I'm out.
That's the scary part, is depending on what news outlet you're looking at or kind of what news you've heard, some people believe it's just going to be the end of us all. And then some people believe it's going to become the easy button for all aspects of business. And it's like, it's not going to be either one, but we have to figure out uniquely how it applies to each industry, each business, each situation. But make no mistake about it, it's a tool to be leveraged.
Yeah, for sure. So you led with like the phrase secret sauce. I'm interested to hear what that means to you, and then we can kind of dive into that.
I think for us at its core, and this is going to sound a little cliche and I'll explain it. I think for us, it's kind of going the opposite way of the traditional agencies. Traditional agencies had a way of operating and a way of dealing with clients and projects and the different things that they worked on. It was from agency to agency, the process was very similar. And that was all even leading up to like COVID. And then after COVID, I think people reinvented themselves, or they were forced to kind of see things a little differently. So I think the industry and how the client and agency relationship was kind of formed changed a little bit, but it's still very, I would say, steeped on the agency side or to the agency's benefit, where for us, the secret sauce is to do the opposite of that, to come into the situation as problem solvers, but to really focus on the needs and kind of the success aspect of what it means to the client. Because if we can keep them happy and keep them successful, then the idea of finding work, maintaining work, and doing projects becomes easy. Where I feel like in a lot of other agencies, it's the opposite. It's really more about, their sales or their projects and finding people to fill those gaps. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And that goes for conversations we've had. The the making ofs behind the scenes, meaning like the people that we work with, and the difficult, probably uninteresting parts of the business that are like the glue that are essential that maybe aren't thought of as much at the beginning, but once there's serious momentum and growth to the company, it has to be addressed.
Yeah. And I think, for us, it's always been, we've allocated a certain percentage of that kind of thinking or those kinds of efforts. Even when we were smaller, like we just said, we're always going to do X, Y, and Z every year so that we never lose sight of that, or we never get sucked into this rut of being traditional. And to your point, as we've continued to grow, so has that percentage of kind of uniqueness. So that the one-off projects or the things that we do with nonprofits, or, I've said this on other podcasts before, but sometimes we just do projects that don't make sense because they fill our cup. And that's important to keep everybody kind of juiced up and to keep everybody kind of excited about the work that we're doing.
How does your team feel about that type of work?
I think they enjoy it. They're always a little, I would say, astounded, like, well, how did this come to be? Or where did this come from? They're kind of trying to figure out the path as to how we find ourselves in these situations sometimes. And I think they're inspired by it. I think they think it's fun. And I think it's just, as long as they're getting paid, I don't know that they care. But I think they like the fun aspect of it. Not that the other projects we do aren't fun, but with the kind of clients and the different kinds of people we worked with, they're almost to be expected. So when you get to do something super unique, like, designing a motorcycle with Janus Motorcycles and Milwaukee Tool, or if you get to do a really cool project with the Chuck Jones Center for Creativity, these are things that stand out amongst all the other client work that we do. So for them, it's like they're proud of it. I think, and it really stirs up kind of their creativity and their imaginations as to how far and what directions we can take this company.
Yeah, it's like the personalization. I think that one thing I've noticed of working with you guys, and to give context to this conversation, we've been working together for years now. Like,
yeah,
we've got several years under our belt.
Yeah, we do.
And at the beginning of a relationship, it seems that, and I'm just taking from owning businesses and like what I've done, like the beginning, there's a level of, like, we'll call it likability you have with someone. And there's an established trust depending where the relationship comes from. But like, as the relationship proceeds, then that trust deepens. And often what happens is that people will get comfortable. And I haven't seen that. Like, I've seen you guys like continually be hungry to be creative and to be creative and grow the team, but not in a way where it's like, we're this startup and we're going to make it the cool place. And we're adding in blockchain because blockchain sounds really cool. You're like, no, we're adding in really good, cool people and like maybe additional services, it's like you've done mobile apps now and other stuff like that, but it's focusing on the core and those relationships and expanding that way instead of having to grow as far as becoming a household name. Like, that's not of importance.
Yeah, when I think about the Cyberdogz brand, it's not something I can really manufacture to be that way, but through our actions, through our culture, I think we can get there. I want the brand to be seen as kind of an offshoot, rebellious type brand that takes chances, takes swings. I think it's important that we stay that way, because it's not only the path that brought us here, but it's the path that's allowed us to find uniqueness, and it's the path that's kind of led us to where we're at today with some of these obscure kind of oddball scenarios we find us in. And I mean that in the nicest way, but I don't know that I could have guessed that we would be doing some of these things when we started the company, 8-9 years ago. It just kind of worked out that way because of the behaviors that we've adopted.
Yeah. speaking of those behaviors, like I'm like taking this conversation and this is on your podcast and I'm like navigating this, and I guess to give the audience context, like I hate being interviewed. I like to interview people. And so even when I'm interviewed, I'm like, no. Like, let me just like turn the mic and start asking questions. I don't like it. And, it's like with you, like we've had, we obviously like even in person, like you're easy to talk with in person as you are on Zoom and with your team. And so you've mentioning like secret sauce. I would love to hear like the depth of that, because like it means something to you, like the brand, the culture, all of this, like there's meaning to it. Whereas if you talk with some agencies, it's just like straight up numbers, and that's all that matters to them.
My clients have all heard this, and so has my team, but I always operate by like a rule of 80-20. If I can be 80% confident and 80% educated and 80%, like if I can be very business astute and very well kept on the 80%, then the 20% is left for me to just do whatever I want to do. And that means chasing a ridiculous idea, or maybe adding something to the equation, to the culture, to the, kind of the mix up of what Cyberdogz is that doesn't make sense. And where that comes from is when I was in the corporate world, everything was about the numbers. And if the numbers didn't match or the numbers didn't apply, your only next hope was to get the approval from the guy above you to keep going. Even if you knew in your gut, like, I know this will work, but the numbers don't say it, so what do I do now? And that to me always kind of left so much opportunity on the table, and it left so many things that kind of brings joy or brings, can fill your cup. You're just throwing those things to the wayside because you're just blindly walking away from it because the math doesn't work out. And for me, it was always like, I need the math to work out in a way, but I just need it to get me at least 2/3 there, 80% there, whatever it is. And then I can figure out the rest. And yeah, I'm probably going to fail a few times in that 20%, but if I win, if I figure it out, if I solve the riddle, so to speak, at least a handful of times, I'm going to have a handful of very unique and very special scenarios that perhaps would have been left on the table or left by the wayside by not taking that chance. So that's kind of how I've looked at Cyberdogz from the beginning, and how I've chased relationships, how I've knocked on certain doors that maybe I had no business knocking on, but I just did it anyway. How I've hired and grown the team, how I found people, and I'm not trying to make it sound like they didn't deserve it, but giving people the chance. Even when we hire people, I'm not looking for 100%, I'm looking for 2/3. If they have 2/3 of what I need, I can teach the other third. That's easy. Because to chase unicorns and to try to find somebody who can do 100% of what you want to do, it's not fair, and it's not all that realistic either.
Yeah, you actually touched on a couple of things that have me thinking. One is like hiring and people. I read this study about SEAL Team 6 and what they're doing when they're finding new people on that's going to be joining them. I don't know if you've heard this or not, if I've told you this story. So they draw this like quadrant, and on one side of it you have trustworthiness, and the other you have skills and abilities. And what a lot of corporate America wants is they want to find someone that has like the most skills and ability and highest trustworthiness. And often what they do is they don't have the ability to measure trustworthiness, so they're just focusing on skills and abilities. Mm-hmm. And with that, you can get a really dangerous person. And on the opposite end is you have extreme trustworthiness. And for SEAL Team, what that meant was that, would you trust this person with your family and with your finances? That's a pretty good barometer. Yeah. And so they identified that they actually will take people with lower skills but higher trustworthiness because they know they're a fit. That's what I've noticed you guys do. And I'm not stating that you guys don't have talented people, but I'm stating is like the trustworthiness is there. And it's like a conversation I've had with my kids. Like, there are soft skills and hard skills. Like, I can teach you how to design something, or I can teach you whatever that is. But like, unless you have the discipline inside to be trustworthy or to be a hard worker or whatever that is, like, I can't teach you that. Like, I can instill it, and I hope you get that as a child. And like, in business relationships, it's not my job to go and find a company that I'm going to make them trustworthy. Like, they are or they're not.
Right. Yeah, and that's a very similar way. That's kind of how we look at it is, it depends on what position we're hiring or what team member we're bringing on or even what project we're chasing. But we always look at that, like I said, that 80%. If that checks most of our boxes and our other 20% is left to the gut or left to our experience or kind of left to even our want or need to do something unique and creative, that might be enough for us to say yes. And it might be enough for us to all of a sudden end up in a situation where we're doing something kind of crazy unique, and I'd say, everything from hiring the people to starting a podcast to the different channels of services we've offered in the business. Like, there's always risk involved, in running a business. But I think for us, it's really been kind of chasing uniqueness. And yes, the risk comes with it, but that's kind of how we've found kind of our own culture and our own way of doing things. Like, I never would have guessed when we started this. I mean, I ended up at San Diego Comic-Con last year, representing Cyberdogz, but also through our relationship with the Chuck Jones Center for Creativity. And you think of that, the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon and how it all connects and how one introduction leads to another. And it all started with one of those kind of harebrained ideas that didn't make sense. So I'm a big believer in, sometimes you just got to do stuff for the sake of doing stuff.
So if we have to take that, my mind is going to not the talking points, but like, if I were in the car listening to this interview, this podcast, I'd sit there and go, okay, I get it. Like, I'm going to play Kevin Bacon with my business. You know what I mean? I'm going to look at that, and then I'm going to look at this 80-20. I would love to hear like what of the secret sauce, like extracting that from your brain and then listing that out so that another business owner can shorten the learning curve, because you guys have been around for a long time and you've put in the hard work, and it's so much easier to learn from others. And so I want others to be able to learn from that hard work.
Yeah, I don't know that I've got it mapped out as like a 5-step program or anything, but like for me, it's, for one, you just have to have a vision for where you want it to go. And you have to understand that it takes time, and B, even though you might be, shooting for the Super Bowl, to end up in the playoffs is pretty good too. So you have to kind of manage your expectations as you go and then just keep trying. So like for us, when it comes to kind of unique clients or unique business propositions, we just, some of it comes according to plan or things we've been talking about for years. And sometimes it's a matter of one of the team members saying, I'd really like to work with this company. Wouldn't that be cool? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, why can't we? Why don't we reach out to them? Why don't we look on LinkedIn? Let's send them a message. Let's send them a care package. We just start kind of carving down these ways in which we can at least at minimum put ourselves in front of representatives from that country or that company is just a start. And then, all of a sudden you get a response on LinkedIn and it's like, okay, well, that's one step further in the process. Oh, and then they referred me to the actual decision maker, and that's another step further in the process. And then you trade emails back and forth with that person for probably 6 months. And then all of a sudden, so I mean, it's a grind and it's a process. But if you believe in kind of wanting to get there and you believe in the fact that it actually can happen through that, like that determination and persistence, something will come from it. It might not be exactly what you think it's going to be, but something will come from it. Like one of the quotes that I like if you change nothing, nothing changes. So like if you're feeling stagnant, or if you're in this aspect of your business where, yeah, it's pretty routine, we just kind of go through the motions and it's pretty same, it's pretty consistent month over month, year over year. If that's what you're looking for, then just keep doing what you're doing. But if you want to shake it up, you got to make some changes. You got to change something. You have to throw a wrench in the process in order to create some kind of a ripple effect that hopefully you can control and manipulate and steer towards what you want it to be. And it's just something we always, I mean, I'm probably the Pied Piper of that whole model, but it's just something that we all, focus on year over year. Like, what are we going to do different this year? What is that thing? And we don't necessarily know what that is when we start out, but hopefully by the time the year's over, we will have done one thing that was bizarre, unique, something that filled our cups, something that made us feel like, man, that was a really cool project.
You said one thing in there that I think is the secret sauce that you're willing, and I'm going to extract that out, which is when you're starting, you might not know exactly what it is, but you're willing to do it. And then at the end, you can retrospectively look back and say, this is where we ended up. These are the steps that we took. We didn't even imagine. Like you probably, go years back, you never imagined that you'd design a motorcycle, but like, there you go. You've done that. Never imagined that you'd be working with the best comic book artists in the world. You've done that. And I think that it probably goes into the 80-20, and I'm maybe exaggerating this. Like, 80% of the time, we're not getting the results that we want, but by doing the work, we're getting better results. And 20% of the time, we get what we want. But maybe 80% of that 20% of what we got, we're like, I could have actually dreamed bigger or done something even better. And so you've found the blend between the two.
Yeah, and I would even say as how that translates to clients. Most clients, the conversation starts with, here's what I want to do, here's what my competitors are doing. And they don't use these words, but they're coming at it from a very cookie cutter approach because they don't really know where to start. And I'll go through the whole 80-20 thing with the client to say, okay, let's take everything you just asked for and everything you just said and everything your competitors are doing. Let's put that in the 80%. What's the 20%? What's the oddball thing? What's the thing that's unique about you or your business model or your perspective? What's that 20% extraction that we can do that makes you unique? Because that's going to be the secret sauce or the sweet spot in your whole marketing plan that gets you not only where your competitors are at, but it's going to get you beyond them. That's what we all have to figure out. And I got to beat that out of the clients sometimes because it's way more comfortable to just sit inside the box and do what everybody else is doing. And it's probably less scary as well. But to get that 20, to figure out what their unique proposition is, it's the hardest part, but it's the funnest part, because once they get it, once they see it, and once they can kind of embrace that side of themselves, they completely blossom. And that's when the brand actually comes to life for the client. Before that, it was just a logo. But once they figure out, here's how I'm special, now all of a sudden they're backing it. They're backing their brand, and they're talking the talk and walking the walk, and they're walking tall. And that's what matters. That's why we have to get to that 20%.
That's the secret sauce right there.
I did
that was solid.
It was, but I'll trust you. Yeah.
No, that's it. It really is. I think my final thought on it is something from Warren Buffett, which people ask him, and I'm paraphrasing. Most investors out there are saying, what is it that I need to go and make a good investment on, or what are the best decisions I can make? And Warren Buffett's saying, what are the things that I can do? What bets can I make where I will not fail? And so by you doing your 80%, you're doing it so that you've got 80% of things that are working, and then you're taking the 20%, the secret sauce.
Yeah.
And then you're making it so they don't fail. That's pretty cool.
If you'd like to learn more about Cyberdogz, share your thoughts, or even ask a specific question about this episode and or the brand Retro Mindset, contact me directly at mike@cyberdogzmarketing.com.